Okay, remember that they're changing my voice, and everyone who's interfered, their families will cook to the extreme, their souls, that is, and they will cook far more than they otherwise would. This is part 3 about Proverbs, about wisdom, insight, sense, discernment. Okay, and we're going to start with Proverbs 15, because this is part 3. Verse 13, a happy heart makes the face cheerful, but heartache crushes the spirit. So when females are dumb enough to date some conformist worm, okay, their souls are going to cook to the extreme. Why? Not only because it's obviously wrong, but because the gospel, as they say, was preached to the world, but more specifically and more importantly, far more importantly, is that common sense was preached to the world in various ways by people's actions, by the spectrums of behaviors that you see, what have you. So when they go as far as to persecute me for highlighting things like Proverbs 15:13, their family spirits are reduced, they become worms, and they're headed to hell to the extreme. And why? So they can live life like a fool. So it is very disheartening, as they say, to see people choose scum over righteous people. See attractive females decide to, join secret societies, be Eastern stars. It rarely happens, but some are more attractive than others. To join various groups, right? Corporations, to become models, to date, people from the churches who have failed miserably, just so miserably. When they try so hard to kind of benefit from the sabotage that occurs and present some Boy Scout-looking dog, it is pathetic for them to choose them. These are people who change the sound of my voice. They have fumes in the air. Even the way I said dog just now sounded kind of weird, almost gay, because these people try to make other people seem less attractive while they date attractive females, and curses on them and their families to the extreme, curses on their offspring to the extreme for that. So verse 14, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. So if you're really discerning, you're seeking the knowledge. This is the next verse, right? If you really fear God and you're discerning, you're going to seek what it's like to be with a righteous person, not with a conformist. Very straightforward. Going to verse 21. Folly brings joy to one who has no sense, but whoever has understanding keeps a straight course. So whoever has understanding keeps a straight course, even and especially if they're going to be persecuted. If you truly understand God's plan, and the scoundrels who want everyone to conform say they'll persecute you if you follow God, it should be more obvious to you that you should follow God, not less. Life is short. The best years of life are shorter. But first and foremost, no matter what the situation is, you should obey God, and there's no excuse for not doing so. Proverbs 16:16. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight than silver, right? How come gold diggers don't understand that? They don't understand what is far greater than gold is wisdom, and what is far greater than silver is insight. Why don't they get that? All right, Matthew 6, store riches in heaven. You have all these churches and all these other groups teaching them to be gold diggers. Then you have conformists saying, hey, we're not all like that. When they're guilty as can be, it's like one demon pointing to another demon saying they're not like them, as if they are not to be chastised. You've yoked yourself to them, so you are like them. You've conformed with them, so you are like them. Verse 21. The wise in heart are called discerning, and gracious words promote instruction. Now, gracious and not dishonorable or dishonest. There's a difference. Proverbs 17:16. Why should fools have money in hand to buy wisdom when they are not able to understand it? Okay, so why do these people go to church, or these people preach in church? They don't know what the hell they're talking about, because they're not in the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Now, some might say something very stupid, very, 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 very stupid. Okay, they might say, well, why do you refer to it that way? That's stupid, right? Let's see here. Have you been lying about the divine order and pointing to people like Ben Bernanke and Adam Sandler and Bibi Netanyahu and all the rabbis who agree with them, and all the controlled opposition rabbis who quote-unquote disagree with them? Have you been confusing them with your white social norms? Yes. Is God's order a black African order in terms of the spirit? Yes. It's a black African martial art order. That's where mankind comes from. Genesis 10. Okay, have you been lying about the significance of ancient African martial artists, especially and including when you interpret the Bible? Yes. So the smart and wise thing to do to honor God and the righteous is to highlight and emphasize, like Proverbs tells us to do. Emphasize who's righteous and who isn't. That's what Proverbs is about. It goes on and on about the difference. For example, the next verse, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. So it's describing who is who. The one who has no sense shakes hand in pledge and puts up security for a neighbor. So you're putting up security, spiritually speaking, for the white man, for the Jew, and you're forsaking me and God. You're forsaking God and I. Because you're like, look, I'm going to do it their way. Who are they? The colonists? Those people who in an organized manner cheat me out of my right to lead? How dare you do it their way? How dare you to the essence of your soul? And you're going to live with that disgrace forever. It's a pathetic, racist, and intolerable decision. Verse 24, now they do things like that. They say, well, he wasn't thinking straight when he said that. That is stupid. Do people know I'm right to say that? Yes. I will be shocked if even one person with average intelligence or better was confused about the fact that I'm clearly right to say it that way. Clearly. Verse 24. A discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. A discerning person keeps the highest point of wisdom in view. Wisdom calls out at the highest point. Proverbs 8, a discerning person is in the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Why? So they can keep wisdom in view. But a fool follows all kinds of idiots because they're conditioned to, because they're racist, because they're a coward, you name it. Verse 28. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Now, what are they referring to? Are they saying that Jesus should have held his tongue in the story? Or Stephen the martyr? Or John the Baptist? That's why they're proverbs. You have to look into them deeply. Right? When you do martial arts, you don't just learn to punch or a kick. And I'm not saying everyone has to do martial arts. If they obey God, they're me. You learn how to think deeply about how to apply them and the different angles and so on and so forth, right? Angels work angles in the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order. Proverbs 18:15. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. So they're seeking us. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. That means coming into the Spirit of God and the divine order. That means dating with the scale that I give you from God. That means moving with the scale that I give you from God. And notice, they can't beat me at a debate. It's not like, hey, this guy's a tyrant and he wants people to do things his way. They have no counter argument, no viable counter argument for what the universally moral thing to do is. And in Luke 12:57, it doesn't say, why don't you wait for some idiot in the church to say you had a dream? It says, and I'm not talking about Martin Luther King, mind you. It's a more complex issue. It says, why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? So what are they referring to? A universal scale for right and wrong. The Lord is known and exalted by his acts of justice, by his righteous acts, because they're universally understood as righteous. So we're going to skip Proverbs 19. There was no insight or discernment or wisdom verse, if I'm not mistaken here. Chapter 20, verse 5. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. So how do you understand who's who? You have to have insight. How do you know which person to trust? You have to cultivate universal wisdom, discernment, and insight. Now think about this. Some people say, well, no, God reveals this, this, and this when you read the Bible. That's why there's over 50,000 denominations in the world and hundreds of thousands more opinions, to say the least, millions and millions of more opinions. Okay? What's the difference between a retard going into a church and somebody who's the most insightful person that ever lived? You think that doesn't factor in at all when they're trying to understand what God wants? When the prophets in the Old Testament are chastising the Jews, they're saying things that are like, look, it's very obvious here. God expects you to be sincere. He's not saying, well, I gave you a dream. What's the problem? He's saying, look, what the hell is the problem with you people? This is common sense here.